Hey, don't blink, because what we're about to uncover isn't written in textbooks or whispered in classrooms. This is the side of medieval Europe that makes people shift in their seats, the one behind the altar, beneath the veil, inside locked chambers and silenced mouths. Tonight, we're peeling back the skin of a world that feared women not because they were weak, but because they felt. This isn't a story about queens or battles. It's about the ordinary woman with dirt under her nails and a storm in her chest. The one who dared to feel pleasure in a time that called it sin. Who wanted something more than survival and paid for it with fire, shame, exile, or silence. So if you're ready to go there, truly go there, hit that like button and subscribe, but do it with intention. This isn't safe content. This is sacred, raw, forbidden ground. You wake up to the weight of a world you don't fully understand. It's not the pressure of sunlight or the pull of a heavy quilt, but something older, heavier, quieter. The village is already alive around you. Bells toll in the distance, smoke curls from chimneys, and somewhere a rooster insists on being heard. Beneath it all, though, there's a hum, faint but constant, the rhythm of a place that watches without blinking. You walk into the square, straw crunching under your feet. Women in wool skirts glide past with baskets on their hips, and their eyes lowered just enough to avoid confrontation, but not enough to miss anything. The air smells of wood ash, sour bread, damp stone. Someone murmurs a name, Magda, the widow near the river, and a silence settles like mist. She had another visitor last night, a man, and that's enough to make everyone pause. Not because it's scandalous in the way stories might later be told, but because it's dangerous. Because here, a woman who shows want, who dares to feel pleasure, isn't just frowned upon, she's marked. You feel the way eyes linger a little too long when you don't speak softly enough. How glances become questions. How posture can be read like a script. There's a social choreography here, and one wrong move makes you the subject of every whispered prayer. In this world, silence isn't just golden, it's armor. Desire in this place is not a whisper in the dark or a secret under the sheets. It's a crack in the wall, something that threatens the whole structure. You're not supposed to want, not here, not like that. A woman who seeks her own joy, who admits to enjoying touch, is a problem to be fixed or removed. She makes others uncomfortable, not because she harms them, but because she makes them question the rules they've clung to. As you walk, someone brushes past you with a muttered apology, and you catch the scent of earth and lavender. Maybe it's just soap, maybe it's something more. Every detail matters here, every sound, every expression, every breath. A girl at the well glances your way, then quickly turns back, her face red. You wonder who taught her to fear her own instincts. Or maybe no one needed to teach her. Maybe she learned just by watching what happens to women like Magda. You follow the sound of gossip like a thread winding through cobblestones and into the heart of something deeper. You're not in danger, not yet, but you feel it anyway, like a tremor in your chest, a tug behind your ribs. You're not supposed to feel, but you do, and already that's enough to set something in motion. At the edge of the square, past the church's looming shadow, is a wooden fence with initials carved deep into the grain. You run your fingers over them. Some are paired with hearts, others are crossed out. It feels like a code, remnants of defiance, of affection, of stories too risky to tell aloud. You wonder how many women stood here, daring to want something more than obedience. The church bell rings again, and it's not a call to prayer. It's a reminder of rules, of roles, of how the world is supposed to function. You look around and realize that no one is smiling. Not really. The only laughter you hear is tight, nervous, because even joy can be a liability, especially when it's yours. You don't know it yet, but you've already broken the first rule, noticing, seeing the game for what it is, feeling the weight of your own curiosity pressing up against the boundaries drawn around you. And the more you notice, the harder it is to pretend. The crack widens, the air thickens, and still you stay. Later, you'll remember this moment, the soft scrape of your shoes against stone, the hush that follows your passing, the way even the birds seem to keep secrets, and you'll know that this was the beginning. Not of rebellion, not yet, but of awareness, the most dangerous seed of all. You keep walking, and the path curves behind the church. The building stands tall, its arched doorway gaping like a warning. Inside is where they tell you who you are, or who you're supposed to be, but you've already begun to wonder. And that, more than anything, is what they fear. It begins early. You're told your body is not really yours, not in stories, not in school, not in whispered warnings passed from mother to daughter. Before you ever understand the shape of desire, you're taught the shape of ownership. First, you belong to your father. Then, to a husband you may not choose. Then, if you're very lucky, to no one, because by then, you've been emptied of expectation. A girl isn't expected to ask questions about pleasure. She's expected to endure, to smile when spoken to kneel when instructed. Her thoughts aren't hers. Her opinions don't count. Her silence is proof of her value, and that silence becomes the first thing you learn to carry. Your body becomes a container of legacy, of purity, of other people's expectations. And yet, within that container, something pulses. Something uncertain and warm and real, a flicker of curiosity, an echo of want. It terrifies them. You sit beside the river now, watching the light ripple across the water. A woman down the bank is rinsing linens, her sleeves rolled high. Her hands move with practiced grace, but her eyes are elsewhere. You wonder if she remembers the first time someone told her not to laugh too loudly, not to walk alone, not to say no too quickly, or yes at all. You wonder how many times she's been told that her instincts are not to be trusted. The truth is, control doesn't start with chains or commands. It starts with stories, tales of saintly women who never raised their voices, of wives who bore children without complaint, of daughters who married without argument. These stories are passed down as virtues, but they are warnings. Don't deviate, don't desire, don't dare. Even in marriage, you don't become free. You simply transfer ownership. Your pleasure is still a problem. If you want too much, you're suspicious. If you want nothing, you're broken. Either way, it's your fault. You've failed to conform to a system that was never designed for you, and this is where the fear sharpens. Because the moment you realize you are not a vessel, but a being, their grip falters. The rules begin to wobble, so they double down. They call you unnatural. They call you wicked. They say your want will bring ruin. You stand now beneath an apple tree, its branches heavy with fruit not yet ripe. A child skips past you, her braid swinging like a pendulum. She laughs, unguarded, for now. But you know how quickly that freedom will be carved into something else, how soon she will be taught to shrink. The church bells ring again, louder this time. A call to return, a call to remember. But you don't move. You stay where you are, listening to the sound fade into the distance, and for the first time, you feel it, the faint, persistent pulse of defiance. Because if your body is not yours, then whose is it? And why do they fear your joy so much if it holds no power? You already know the answer. You already feel it in your bones, and no sermon, no law, no whispered threat can make you unknow it. The path stretches before you now, worn, uneven, but clear. Each step a quiet rebellion. Each breath a reminder. You are still here, and you're starting to remember who you were before they told you who to be. You hear it first in a whisper, soft, cautious, curling through the corners of the marketplace like smoke. Someone's daughter laughed too freely last night. Someone's widow smiled too long at the miller's boy. And suddenly, those moments become more than memory. They become evidence. In this world, so your pleasure is not just unexpected, it's unacceptable. It isn't something natural to be understood or even quietly ignored. It is seen as a crack in the order of things, a breach in the walls they've built to contain you. If you show it, they'll try to shut you down. If you hide it and they still sense it, they'll come for you anyway. You walk past a chapel, its stones cool and damp, ivy creeping up the sides like fingers. Inside, the pews are empty, but you can almost hear the echo of sermons past. They talk of Eve, always Eve, as if she invented temptation just by existing. Her hunger was the beginning of sin, they say. Her curiosity, her reach, and her bite. Never his choice, always hers. The first whisper of joy punished forever. You pause at the village well, where children play and mothers chat in cautious tones. A woman, maybe 20, maybe more, drops her bucket with trembling hands when someone calls her name too sharply. She laughs to cover it up, but her eyes flick to the priest on the road. She's been warned before. She doesn't need to be warned again. And still, people feel. Of course they do. The body doesn't care for rules written in Latin. It wants what it wants. But the moment that desire surfaces, when a woman leans too close, sighs too loudly, lingers too long, she stops being a person. She becomes a problem. There are stories, and you hear them everywhere. A girl danced barefoot after sundown. Her feet were clean, her dress too light. A man claimed she looked at him with intent. Days later, she was gone. They say she ran. They say she burned. They say a lot of things. No one ever says what she wanted. Desire, when it's yours, becomes their excuse. It becomes a reason to question your soul, your sanity, your safety. They'll say you've been touched by spirits, that no godly woman would smile that way, walk that way, laugh that way. You're not joyful, you're possessed, and that makes you vulnerable to more than gossip. In one corner of the village, by the edge of the pasture, an old woman swears she saw a girl turn into a hare at nightfall. She'd been seen with a peddler, they say, a man with silver rings and a foreign accent. 2 nights later, the girl was accused of seducing him with charms. They found lavender under her mattress and a wax doll tucked behind her rafters. She said it was just for dreaming. They said it was proof. They always find proof if they want it badly enough. You pass the blacksmith's shop and see his wife staring into the fire, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. Her arms are covered, even in the heat. Someone mentioned once that she used to sing. Loudly, they said. Beautifully. No one hears her now. It's not just fear that keeps women quiet. It's memory, collective and personal. Every scream that went unanswered. Every trial that began with a look and ended with flames. Every woman who was told that her body wasn't hers and then punished for it anyway. Because here's the truth they won't say aloud. They fear what they can't control. And female pleasure, real pleasure, the kind that's claimed without permission, is the most uncontrollable force of all. It doesn't ask. It doesn't wait. It doesn't fit in pews or contracts or family names. It arrives like wind, unseen but undeniable. You sit beneath an elm tree now, the shade cool against your skin. A breeze stirs the leaves, and somewhere nearby, a girl laughs. Not the careful kind, the reckless kind. You hear a bird fall silent. You hear footsteps slow. Someone heard her. Someone is already wondering what that laugh means, and it could mean anything. It could mean nothing. But that's the danger, because if she wanted, if she enjoyed, if she let herself feel, then she's not a woman anymore in their eyes. She's a threat, a story, a lesson. You think of how many voices have been silenced not by rope or pyre, but by fear of those things. How many women learned to smile politely while folding their wants into corners of their hearts? How many learned to moan silently into straw pillows? How many learned not to reach? And yet, the stories survive. Not in books, not in sermons, but in looks exchanged across the square, in herbs passed hand to hand, in songs sung low when no one's listening. Because desire never truly dies, even in a world that calls it sin, even in a village that pretends not to feel. You stand again, brushing dirt from your skirt, and you realize something else. You haven't spoken aloud in hours, not because you don't want to, but because you've learned what happens when a woman is heard. And still, some part of you wants to speak, wants to laugh, wants to feel. That part of you is dangerous, and that's exactly why it must survive. The church doesn't fear the devil half as much as it fears you. Not you specifically, not your name, your hair, your footsteps, but what lives beneath your skin, what pulses in your veins when no one's watching. That quiet flicker of want, that dangerous, uncontainable spark of pleasure. That's the threat. Not sin, not hell, not rebellion. You. Because if you are capable of feeling deeply, of wanting for yourself, then you are not just someone's daughter, wife, or servant. You are not just a vessel or a vow. You are something wild, and the church has never hid a prayer against the wild. Inside the chapel, the air hangs heavy with incense and judgment. The statues stare down with eyes that never blink. You've seen this place before, rows of candles, whispers in Latin, and always the stories. Stories about women who listened to serpents, women who tasted what they were told not to touch, women who reached. Eve reaches. That's how it always begins. The sermons repeat it like a spell. She ruined everything. Not the man beside her, not the silence that followed. Her hunger is what broke the world. It was her taste, her choice, her voice. And from that moment on, every woman carried the price of wanting. Every girl was told quietly or loudly that curiosity is betrayal, that the body is deceitful, that to want is to wound. The men who wrote these rules had ink-stained fingers and trembling faith. They feared the curve of a hip more than the edge of a blade. Their writings warned of lust like it was plague-born, a woman's voice too sweet, temptation, her gaze too long, invitation, her step too light, a sign of corruption already underway. St. Augustine said that true purity meant disdaining desire, even in marriage. St. Jerome compared women's voices to the hiss of snakes. Aquinas debated whether a woman who found pleasure in intimacy was closer to a beast than a soul. These weren't fringe ideas, they were doctrine. And when faith became law and law became habit, the fear deepened. You sit now at the edge of the nave, watching a priest prepare for Mass. He moves slowly, reverently, folding cloth over the chalice like he's tucking in a secret. He won't speak of you directly. He doesn't need to. Every line of scripture, every metaphor, every carefully chosen parable reminds you what's expected. Not joy, not boldness, not fire, obedience, modesty, distance from your own body. You hear the prayer begin, soft, practiced, ancient. But beneath it is something else, a shudder, because no matter how many hymns they sing, they know the truth too, that the very thing they condemn is also the thing they crave, and that's what terrifies them most. Not your fall, but your power to pull others with you. Desire in a man is expected. In a woman, it's treason. And so, they dressed it in demons. They gave it horns and hooves and flaming eyes. They said if you moaned, it meant you were possessed, that your dreams could open the gates of evil, that your hunger wasn't human, it was a tool of ruin, that if a man sinned, it was because you led him there. You shift on the wooden pew, feeling the grain bite into your back. Somewhere behind you, a woman stifles a cough. No one turns. No one comforts. You are all trained unconsciously to pretend not to feel, and yet some part of you aches. Not from the shame or the weight of centuries, but from the memory of something older than the church, deeper than its stone walls, the simple truth of being alive, of having skin that tingles and lungs that fill and a heart that beats for more than survival. They call it lust. You call it remembering. The sermon ends, the priest bows his head, and you slip out the side door before anyone can catch your eye. Outside, the air smells of grass and ash. A girl runs past barefoot, chasing a chicken and laughing too loudly. Her mother snaps her name sharply, too sharp, not because the laugh was rude, because it was real, and real for girls is dangerous. There's a rule here, unspoken, but etched into every surface. Don't show it, don't name it, don't even think it too clearly, or someone else will think it for you and turn it against you. Because here, even the word desire is a kind of spell. It slinks through taverns and churches, across fields and stone halls. If it lands on the wrong woman's shoulders, it changes everything. She's not a wife, she's a temptress, not a girl, a threat. And that transformation doesn't come with fire or trial. It starts with silence. Someone notices she smiles too easily. Someone mentions she walks with too much sway, that her voice is low, her eyes too quick. Maybe she's just kind. Maybe she's just alive. Doesn't matter. The story begins. You hear it at the baker's stall, folded between conversations about flour and price. She's been different lately. That's all it takes. From there, the story builds itself. She laughed with the wrong man. She stayed out too late. She brushed her hair in the morning light, and someone saw. Every layer of society adds another warning. Mothers to daughters, priests to flocks, law to the body. The message is always the same. Don't want, don't feel. Don't awaken something that should stay locked beneath obedience and linen. Even among noble women who wear velvet and pearls, the word is poison. Desire turns them from treasures into threats. A duchess who enjoys her husband too openly risks rumors. A lady who doesn't produce children is whispered to be barren. Unless she enjoys her solitude, then she's unnatural. Either way, she's wrong. Even in monasteries, the whisper lives. Among nuns who've taken vows of silence, you'll find eyes that linger too long on the statue of a bleeding Christ, writings hidden in the folds of hymnals, pages torn from letters and burned before dawn. Because want does not die behind stone walls. It hates, it twists, it waits. You keep walking through the meadow behind the chapel. The grass is high, golden at the tips. The sky feels too wide here, like it might swallow you whole. And yet, you feel the press of every rule still, even here, even now. Because desire doesn't need to be seen to be punished. It just needs to be possible. And that, more than anything, is what they want to erase. In the world you've entered, there are only two kinds of women worth naming: the untouched and the untouchable, the virgin and the Madonna. One is silent and clean, a creature of shadows and prayers. The other is nurturing, sacred, her value bound entirely to her ability to give life, to love without wanting, to serve without question. These are the blueprints, the only two roles you are permitted to play. Step outside of them, and you disappear not in body but in name, in dignity, in worth. You are told from the beginning that the perfect woman is two halves of an impossible whole. She must be innocent but wise, obedient but strong, fertile but chaste. Her body is to be useful, not enjoyed. Her thoughts should echo those of her confessor. Her smile, when given, must be carefully timed and utterly devoid of meaning. Nothing must be too loud. Nothing must be too alive. You learn this not through books, not through open teaching, but in the glances of older women, in the raised eyebrows, the quiet corrections, the shifting silences that follow when you laugh just a little too freely. Behind closed doors, the weight of this expectation carves itself into your spine. You keep your eyes down, not out of shyness, but self-preservation. You adjust your posture in ways you don't remember choosing. The ideal they worship is not a woman, it's a statue, cold, unblinking, and passive. And if you feel warmth in your chest, if you hunger, if you even dream in the wrong direction, then you are no longer the Virgin, no longer the Madonna. You are something else, something unnamed, something they do not know how to forgive. But what if you're neither? What if you're something in between? A woman who wants, but also loves. A mother who aches for more than duty. A girl who looks in the mirror and sees not purity or sainthood, but a flicker of wildness she refuses to bury. There is no room for her here, no words for her, so she makes her own. She learns to speak in signals, in looks, in half smiles that carry entire conversations, in the brief pressure of a hand passed too slowly, the brush of fingers over a piece of linen. She learns how to be seen without being seen, heard without making a sound, because silence in this world is a form of speech, and sometimes in the right company, it becomes solidarity. It begins when you notice another woman noticing you. Her glance doesn't linger too long, just enough. A flicker of understanding. Not pity, not warning, recognition. She's walked this line too. She's been asked to be soft when she felt sharp, to fold herself into roles stitched centuries before she was born. She knows what it's like to pretend not to burn. You watch them, these women, and realize they have built a quiet language of survival. They share secrets in the way they tie their hair, in the herbs they dry on their windowsills, in the songs they hum while spinning wool. You begin to understand that the world you live in is mirrored beneath the surface, shadowed, coded, alive. Even the gossip changes meaning when you know how to listen. That woman who keeps to herself, she's protecting something. The girl who smiles too easily, she's chosen to live, even if it costs her. The widow who still wears red, she remembers who she is. These are not warnings. They are signals, markers, signs for those who are watching, and you are watching. You start to walk differently, not provocatively, purposefully. You find women who look you in the eye and smile with their mouth closed, but their thoughts wide open. You catch glimpses of meetings in the forest edge, gatherings in kitchens thick with steam and unspoken truths. You see a young girl press a ribbon into the hand of another, their fingers touching longer than necessary. You hear laughter that ends too abruptly when someone enters the room, and you learn to hear what came before the silence. This is not open rebellion. This is the underground, the breath beneath the chant, the heartbeat that refuses to stop, even when every rule says it should. You stand outside the bakery one morning and watch a woman with flour on her hands lean across the counter and smile at a customer. He says something crude, and she laughs, but the laugh is flat, practiced. She's performing. But as he turns to leave, her eyes meet yours, and for a moment they're bright, alive, unapologetic. That is the moment you understand the truth. They've spent centuries trying to make you choose between sacred and silent. But the real danger isn't in being one or the other. The danger is in knowing you are neither. The danger is in smiling when they expect fear, in enjoying a story, a moment, a gaze, in feeling pleasure not as a curse, but as your own. And the most dangerous thing of all is passing that smile to another woman and watching her smile back. You were never just born. You were delivered into guilt, branded not with fire or ink, but with a myth that began long before your first breath. The myth that your very existence is a mistake waiting to happen. Before you walked, before you spoke, before you ever felt the warmth of another's touch, they already decided what you were, a warning. They say you carry the fall in your bones. They speak of Eve like she was the first cut in the fabric of paradise, the first crack in the mirror of divine order. She reached, they say. That was her sin, not gluttony, not rebellion, curiosity, hunger. A question whispered into the wrong silence, and when she acted on it, the world unraveled. From that moment on, every girl was born wearing her shadow. You begin to see it everywhere once you know what to look for, in the prayers that beg for purity, in the sermons that preach fear disguised as virtue, in the way men speak of female temptation like it's a force of nature, not a choice, not a will, but a tide, something that rolls in and pulls righteousness out to sea. It's not just the church. The fear seeps into every corner of life, into laws written in script too fine for women to read, into medical texts penned by men who never touched a womb but claimed to know what it whispered, into songs, into lullabies, into the way mothers tell their daughters to cross their arms tighter and walk a little faster past the tavern. They built entire systems around the idea that you're dangerous, entire theories. If a man loses control, it's not his fault. It's your hair, your scent, the way you stood near the doorway when the light hit just right. If a priest feels a flutter of longing during confession, it's because your voice betrayed you. You were too sweet, too soft, too close. You made him stumble. They called it modesty, but it was always management. If they could teach you to hide, to shrink, to doubt, then maybe they could convince themselves you were safe, that the beast they feared wasn't real, that it wasn't in them, but in you. And so, they wrote the fear into medicine, claimed your body was inversion, a man turned inside out, that your womb wandered when you were unwell, drifting through your chest and clouding your thoughts, that your hunger made you hysterical, that your silence was health and your want was a disease. The cures, marriage, obedience, pregnancy, as if the presence of a man could anchor your chaos. You read these things now, not in dusty libraries, but in how the world still reacts to your voice. A woman too passionate is unstable. A woman too composed is cold. Too loud, unruly. Too quiet, suspicious. Too knowing, a threat. You were not designed to fit. You were built to be bent. And yet they wonder why your back is tired. You walk past a schoolroom where boys chant Latin verses and girls learn to sew. The boys will write laws someday. The girls will marry them. That's the balance. That's the plan. Keep the future rulers blind to the source of their fear. Keep the future wives quiet about the power they've learned to suppress. You're expected to be grateful for the structure, to believe it protects you. But what it really protects is their comfort. Because if you looked at yourself, truly looked, and saw not sin but strength, the entire scaffolding would shake. You stop at the edge of a garden where women harvest herbs. Their hands are stained with soil, and their voices hum softly over the wind. One of them holds a sprig of something sharp and green, sage maybe, a plant for cleansing, for memory, for warning. She meets your eyes and smiles, faint but knowing, because beneath all the rules, beneath the doctrine and the diagnoses, there is an older knowledge, a quieter truth, that your body is not a wound, that your pleasure is not proof of failure, that the sin they fear was never a sin at all, just a woman remembering she was never meant to be a statue. You keep walking, and with every step, the guilt loosens, not all at once, not completely, but enough to breathe, enough to begin again, because the original error wasn't yours. It was theirs, thinking they could bury power with shame. They say the body doesn't lie, but in this world, the truth it tells can damn you faster than any spoken word. A gasp, a shiver, the soft exhale of want. These are not signs of life here. They are signals, triggers, warnings. If you feel too much, you've already said too much. And if you sound like you enjoy it, even behind closed doors, even within the sanctity of marriage, you've crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Desire doesn't need witnesses. It only needs to be suspected, and suspicion is enough to begin the slow, brutal process of erasure. There are stories, not legends, not fables, but records. Cold, clerical language, etched into parchment by men who believed law was a mirror of divine order. A woman moaned during intimacy, evidence of corruption. She reached for her partner instead of waiting to be taken. She's bewitched or worse, bewitching. A priest once claimed that a wife who smiled after bedding her husband was no longer a wife. She was a temptress in disguise. That pleasure, if visible, was proof of a pact with something unholy. You wonder how many women learned to keep their eyes closed during touch. How many trained their bodies not to tremble. How many swallowed their sounds, their sighs, their own blooming warmth, just to be safe. Because here, the line between being loved and being accused is as thin as breath. And when breath becomes crime, silence becomes armor. Still, even silence cannot always save you. In certain courts, pleasure itself was introduced as legal testimony. If she enjoyed it, she must have wanted it. If she wanted it, she must have consented. If she consented, then no crime occurred. That logic, vicious and circular, left no space for fear, for coercion, for survival, and worse still, it bled into medicine, into theology, into culture. It became a belief so deep that even the women subjected to it began to question their own reactions. Was I too loud? Did I move the wrong way? Did I make them think I wanted it? You find yourself walking now past a cottage where a midwife once lived, a woman whose job it was to help others understand their bodies, their cycles, their risks. She was hanged after a rumor spread that she'd taught a young wife how to feel pleasure without getting pregnant. No one could prove it, no one needed to. A neighbor overheard laughter, and that was enough. Because in this world, joy is never innocent, especially not yours. And so, you shrink, not because you are ashamed, but because you are watched. Every sound you make might be remembered. Every movement might be recounted, not in kindness, not in curiosity, but as evidence. The way you touched his shoulder, the way you leaned into the heat of his body, the way your mouth didn't say no fast enough. They watch for signs, and when your body shows something unspoken, it betrays you. But what if it was never your body that lied? What if the lie was the silence they demanded, not from you, but from the world that refused to admit it feared what it could not contain? Because the truth is this: they didn't need your confession. Your skin made it for you. And then they turned to science, or something they called science. You reach the edge of the village, where an old stone house crumbles into the weeds. Inside once lived a scholar, a man who studied women without ever speaking to them. He believed the female body was just a male body turned inside out, that the womb, that mysterious pulsing thing, floated through the torso like a lost balloon, causing hysteria, fainting, breathlessness. The cure, he said, was marriage, or if that failed, fumigation. They placed sweet herbs between the legs, bitter smoke at the nostrils, hoping to coax the womb back into place like some disobedient animal. No one asked the woman how she felt. Her symptoms were not evidence of her suffering, but of her disobedience. Her blood was unclean, her silence suspicious, her passion pathological. There were manuals written by men who never bled, never trembled, never carried life or the threat of it. And yet, they dictated how women should sit, how often they should bathe, what foods would balance their humors. They warned of wombs that grew restless, of fluids that turned poisonous, of flesh that desired too deeply and corrupted itself in the process. And they taught these things, not as superstition, but as fact. In schools, in monasteries, in courts. A woman who became too eager was suffering from internal heat. A girl who cried out at night had a wandering uterus. A wife who failed to conceive wasn't unlucky, she was sinful. And if she dared to speak back, to question, to reject the prescribed order, she was mad, or worse, unnatural. You stop now at a small shrine near the forest's edge. Someone's carved a heart into the wood, a symbol of prayer or perhaps memory. Beneath it are offerings: rosemary, wool, a ribbon. Tokens left not for the saints, but for the women who never returned. You kneel there, not to pray, but to remember. Because you too live in a body that has been misread. They called it a vessel, a trap, a temptation. They measured it in inches and fluids and guesses passed down from crumbling scrolls. But they never saw it for what it was, alive, and not theirs to name. You rise again and you walk, not away from the shame, but through it, past the false diagnoses and the false gods of certainty, past the fear they tried to dress up as knowledge, because your anatomy is not a myth, your pleasure is not a flaw, and your silence was never the absence of truth. It was the sound of survival. Beyond the village, past the smoke-touched rooftops and the bell towers that chime warnings more than blessings, stands a stone wall wrapped in ivy and silence. It encircles a convent, a fortress not of war, but of retreat, a place where women are hidden under the name of holiness, where desire is meant to dissolve in prayer and cold water. You enter through a narrow wooden gate that groans under its own memory. Inside, everything is muted: the steps on worn stone, the rustle of robes, the hush of wind filtered through stained glass. The air carries the scent of old wax and dried lavender, a blend of devotion and desperation. This is where women are sent when the world decides they want too much, or when they want nothing at all. Too beautiful, too loud, too clever, too resistant. There's a vow for each of those crimes. Some came willingly, seeking safety. Others were placed here by fathers with too many daughters, or husbands eager to replace them. And some were simply inconvenient. But don't mistake the silence here for peace. Its tension stretched so thin it might snap. These halls are filled with longing, not shouted or confessed, but pulsing just beneath the surface. They say desire doesn't belong here, that it must be cut out like rot. That's what the rules are for: the fasts, the vigils, the nights spent kneeling on stone until blood blossoms beneath the knees. If a nun confesses to feeling too deeply, for a memory, a voice, a dream, she may be given a cold bath, a scourge across the back, or hours of isolation. Not to heal, but to purge. It's not the feeling they fear, it's the refusal to be ashamed of it. Yet even here, under vows of chastity and walls thick enough to mute a scream, desire slips through the cracks. You see it in the way two nuns brush hands when passing a prayer book, in the way a younger sister lingers too long at another's door, in the letters tucked between pages of psalms, full of metaphors that tremble just outside the boundaries of doctrine, a love of God that reads a little too much like longing, a sacred union that involves hidden meetings in the garden at dusk. There are stories buried in these cloisters. One speaks of an abbess who wrote to a visiting monk in verse, her words dripping with heat and metaphor. "Your voice is a candle that lights my soul," she wrote, "but it burns me too." He was reassigned. She was forgiven, or watched more closely. No one knows which. Another tale whispers of a nun found weeping in the chapel, clutching a carved crucifix like a lover. They say she claimed she'd seen an angel in her dreams, that he kissed her behind the altar. Whether they believed her or not didn't matter. Her punishment was real: fasting, isolation, silence. And still, the dreams didn't stop. Desire here is not loud. It's woven into the fabric of ritual. The chants that rise each morning sound pure, but if you listen closely, there's a low note of ache in the harmonies. The paintings on the chapel walls show martyrs and saints, their bodies twisted in ecstasy that's too physical, too intimate to be only spiritual. The prayers are memorized, yes, but some lips move just a little slower on certain names. You walk past the garden, where women tend herbs used for female troubles. Some soothe cramps, others dull the senses. A few, whispered about only in pairs, awaken things that should not be awakened. The knowledge lives in the hands of the older nuns, the ones with eyes like cracked glass and voices soft from too many secrets. They don't speak of what they know. They pass it through touch, through looks, through careful instructions, masked as lessons in healing. This for pain, they say, placing a leaf in your palm. But they never say which kind. And yet, despite the watchfulness, the punishments, the shadows, desire finds its way. Because it is not a thing to be burned out or drowned. It is not obedient. It doesn't vanish in cold water or leave with the bruises. It hides, yes, but it waits. It waits in the folds of linen robes, in the breath held too long during morning mass, in the softness of fingers brushing hair away from a flushed face, in the half-finished poems scribbled in the margins of devotional texts, in the chant that ends one beat too slowly. It waits in dreams, where no confession can reach it. You pass a door and hear laughter, quick, smothered, not meant for anyone's ears. It dies before it travels, but you felt it. Real, sharp, impossible to unhear. That's the truth they'll never write down, that even here, in the most sacred of spaces, the body remembers. It remembers heat. It remembers touch. It remembers the moment it was told to forget, and it doesn't let go. You reach the far wall of the convent, where ivy curls over old stone, carved with symbols so worn they're almost erased. One looks like a dove, another like two hands reaching. You run your fingers over them and feel the history pressed into your palm. These marks are not prayers. They are reminders that someone before you stood here, wanting, not sinning, not breaking, just feeling. And in this place, that alone was enough to be called dangerous. But you don't step back. You don't lower your eyes. You stay. You breathe. And somewhere inside the convent, a bell tolls, not for punishment this time, not for silence, but for the changing of the hour. A new hour, a new breath, and the fire still smoldering in the quiet. She walks into the chamber with trembling hands, not because she is ill, but because she's been told she is. The physician does not meet her eyes. He gestures to a low stool, pulls out a book too thick with opinions, and begins his work. There are no questions, no listening, only the certainty of a man who believes that her body is the mystery, and he the interpreter. Her pain is not her own. It is his to label, to dissect, to explain. This is what medicine looks like here. Not healing, but control. She says she feels warmth low in her belly, and he calls it wandering, not longing, not pleasure. Her womb, he claims, has gone astray, drifted up toward her ribs, pressing on her lungs, clouding her mind. He prescribes fumigation, sweet herbs burned near her legs, foul scents at her face, to scare her womb back into obedience. No one asks how it feels. They only ask, does she still cry at night? Another woman faints when her cycle comes too strong. The midwife offers boiled mint. The doctor orders bloodletting, not once, but again and again, until her skin dims and her limbs weaken. She grows quieter. They call it success. If a wife sighs too often or speaks of dreams, she is diagnosed with imbalance, too much heat, too little reason. Her body, they say, is full of moisture and chaos. A man is made of fire and air, stable. A woman is made of water and earth, shifting, unstable. She is too wet, too soft, too close to madness. They make charts of this, write texts, draw diagrams, not to understand, but to claim authority. The healers they trust are men. They wear robes, carry tools, speak Latin. But the women who know the body, the ones who mix teas in dark kitchens, who know the meaning of each ache, they are suspects. Their knowledge is tolerated only when it is vague, when it is silent, when it stays small. If it works too well, if it cures what others cannot, it becomes suspect. Power in their hands is always dangerous. You walk now through the village's edge, past the house where they once took a girl for treatment. She had stopped speaking after a man in the manor took an interest. The physician examined her and said she was infected with melancholy of the womb. His cure? Forced touch, cold water, herbs laced with opium. Her eyes stayed open, but her voice never returned. This isn't medicine. It's manipulation dressed as care. They call it healing, but it bleeds, it burns, it binds. And always, so always, it reminds the woman, your body is not yours. And when control fails, the accusation begins. They call her witch, not because she chants, not because she conjures, but because she wants. A girl laughs too freely at the well. A widow is seen entering her home late at night with a man who is not her kin. A wife is heard moaning, not from pain, but from something else, and that is enough. Witch. The word arrives not as a curse, but a conclusion, not a question, but a verdict. It is not magic they fear, it is power without permission. A woman who enjoys her own touch is not pure. A woman who chooses her own lovers is not safe. A woman who shows no shame is not human. She is something else, something dangerous, something that must be stopped. You hear the stories spoken in corners about the girl who bewitched the friar with her red lips, about the healer who brewed a tea that kept a girl from bleeding for months. They say she stopped a life from forming. About the midwife who knew too much about which roots made the hips relax and the skin warm. These women vanish, or they return with burns on their hands, or heads shaved, or eyes that no longer meet yours. They test them, they strip them, they mark their backs with hot iron to see if they scream. They bind their hands and throw them into water. If she sinks, she is innocent. If she floats, she is guilty. Either way, the water swallows something. One woman was accused after her husband said she smiled too much during their wedding night. He was ashamed, they say. He couldn't finish, and she had laughed softly, not to mock, but to ease the tension. He reported her, said she had fire in her eyes, said she whispered in her sleep. She was tried 3 days later. They found herbs in her kitchen, not poisons, rosemary, mint, mugwort. She had written a prayer in the back of her Bible. They said it was a spell. They asked her how many men she had touched. They asked her if she dreamed of animals. They asked her if the devil had kissed her. She said nothing. They burned her anyway, because it was never about proof. It was about fear. Fear that she knew too much, that she wanted too much, that she was too free. You pass by a wall now, the sun casting long shadows between the stones. On its surface, someone has scratched a name, just initials really, paired with a symbol. It might have been love, it might have been memory, but the scratch is deep, desperate, like someone trying to make a mark that could not be erased. You reach up and trace the letters. The stone is cold, but your hand is warm, because you are still here, and you remember her, not the witch, not the sinner, not the broken girl or the dangerous woman, just someone who wanted to live and was punished for it. She stands barefoot on the packed earth, shoulders bare, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the crowd. Her hands are bound, not tightly, but enough to remind her that escape is not even a thought. Around her, faces blur into a single wall of judgment. Old women clutching rosaries, boys too young to understand what they're witnessing, and men who pretend this is about justice when it has always been about power. The air smells of ash, sweat, and something sharper, fear disguised as righteousness. Today is not a trial. It is a ritual, not of truth, but of submission. Her body is the courtroom, the evidence, and the crime itself. They call it purification, a test of virtue, but the methods reek of cruelty too deliberate to be anything but punishment. Water, fire, iron. These are their tools, not words, not reason, not compassion, just elements twisted into instruments of control. If her skin burns and she screams, proof she is guilty. If she doesn't react, evidence of unholy resistance. If she bleeds, she is corrupt. If she doesn't, then something is hidden. Every possible outcome condemns her. They begin with inspection. Hands that have no right to touch press against her body, searching for marks, a freckle, a scar, a birth spot. They whisper that the devil leaves a kiss somewhere hidden. No pain? It must be a sign. Too much pain? A sign as well. She can't win, because this is not about discovering guilt. It's about forcing submission. Her silence is the only thing still hers, and even that is questioned. Then comes the water. They strip her down to shift, and prayer, bind her wrists to her ankles, and carry her like a lamb toward the river. No screams now, just the hush of expectation. They say holy water reveals the truth, that if she sinks, the river receives her innocence. If she floats, the water rejects her and proves her pact with darkness. It's a spectacle, not a test, and it never ends in absolution. Even if she survives, she emerges stained in rumor. The stains last longer than bruises. They follow her name like a shadow, whispered across fields and overbred in taverns. She is never clean again. Others face the fire, not always in flame, but in metal, red-hot iron placed on skin to test divine protection. A burn that doesn't blister? Miraculous. But when the blister comes, as it always does, they say the devil withdrew his shield. They press rods to palms, force her to carry glowing bars across the room. Each step is agony, each breath a prayer that no one will say what they're already thinking, that a woman in pain is still suspect, that a woman who endures must be hiding something worse. Even when the rituals end, the judgment doesn't. If she is proven pure, they do not celebrate. They question. Why was she accused at all? What did she do to make people speak? Why did no one come to her defense? The exoneration becomes another wound, invisible but permanent. She may be free in name, but she is shackled in memory. Every door she knocks on will open slowly. Every glance she receives will be filtered through doubt. She walks through the village like a ghost, seen but not trusted. And the worst part, she knows this was never about her. It was about control, about reminding every other woman what can happen if she stands too tall, speaks too clearly, feels too deeply. Her body became a stage for their fear, her pain a sermon to the watching crowd. They wanted her broken, not for what she did, but for what she represented, a woman they couldn't fully name, predict, or silence. As dusk falls and the crowd begins to scatter, her limbs shake not from the cold, but from the realization that survival is not the end. It's the beginning of a new kind of exile, not from the village, but from the illusion of safety, of belonging. Her body, once her own, now walks marked by memory, by ritual, by judgment burned into skin and breath. She will sleep tonight with the sound of water still in her ears, with the smell of iron beneath her nails. She will wake tomorrow and tie her hair a little tighter, speak a little softer, walk with her head just low enough to avoid the next gaze that lingers too long. But deep inside, below the skin they tested and the spirit they tried to break, something remains untouched. Not innocence, not purity, something older, sharper. A quiet vow that the next time they come with their ropes and rituals, she will not flinch. Not because she is no longer afraid, but because she finally knows that it was never her fault, that no woman should ever have to prove she is human. The silence begins before the sentence is ever spoken. It creeps in like fog, low and heavy, settling between doorways and glances, between shared loaves of bread and whispered prayers. It isn't announced. There is no verdict read, no bell that chimes. It simply begins with a woman waking up and realizing no one meets her eyes anymore. She might have laughed too loudly at market. She might have turned down a man's offer too bluntly, or she might have worn a color too rich, walked with too much rhythm, seemed too alive. In the eyes of the village, this is enough, not for a trial, not for fire, but for erasure. And that, in its own way, cuts deeper. It starts small. A neighbor forgets to return a dish. A midwife doesn't come when called. Children are pulled closer by their mothers when she passes. Then the church turns cold. Her name disappears from the prayer rolls. No one says her sins aloud. They don't have to. Her silence is already a confession in their minds. Her absence becomes evidence. The priest doesn't accuse her directly. That's not how this punishment works. Instead, during his sermon, he speaks of purity, of temptation, of the righteous path. He doesn't say her name, but everyone knows, especially her. And when Sunday comes, she walks through the church doors anyway. Head high, palms dry, trying to pretend the space beside her isn't empty, that the baker's wife didn't shift away from the pew. She kneels, she prays. But when communion is passed, the priest's eyes slide over her as if she were never there. She does not receive the bread. She does not drink the wine. She becomes invisible in a place built to offer grace. Outside, life continues, but not for her. She still works, still breathes, still tills the garden. But the air around her is thicker now. The market stalls quiet when she approaches. Conversations shift a mid-sentence. Invitations stop arriving. Even her sister, once loyal, now avoids her window at dusk. And yet, No one has accused her of a crime. That is the genius and the cruelty of the village's silence. It doesn't bruise her skin or chain her limbs. It just makes her disappear in plain sight. And the longer it lasts, the more it becomes a part of her shadow. She questions herself. What did I do? Was it that laugh? That dress? That night I spoke too freely? She replays it again and again until even she starts to wonder whether the silence is deserved. But deep down, she knows. This isn't about guilt. It's about containment, about keeping women quiet, compliant, small, about reminding everyone else that visibility is earned and can be taken away. It's a warning sent through absence, one woman isolated so that others stay in line. Still, she endures. Because silence, once weaponized, can also be reclaimed. She learns to live in it, to listen differently. She finds comfort in the rhythm of her own voice humming to herself. She remembers the way her grandmother taught her that wind through trees can be a kind of music, that there's language in birdsong, truth in the way the earth yields beneath her bare feet. She speaks less, yes, but not from shame, from choice, because in the quiet she finds her edge. She stops apologizing when she's brushed aside. She no longer bows her head when men pass. And one morning at the well, when another woman, younger, trembling, drops her bucket and glances at her with fear in her eyes, she offers the faintest smile, a message, just so I'm still here. And though no one speaks of it, others begin to nod to her again. Small gestures, a warm loaf left on her step, a shawl mended and returned without a name. The silence breaks, not with a declaration, but with humanity, because the village remembers, not with pride, but with quiet guilt, that it could not destroy her, and more importantly, that she did not destroy herself. There is no right answer here, no safe choice. You learn this early, long before your body begins to change, before your thoughts begin to stretch beyond the boundaries drawn for you. The rules are simple until you try to follow them. Say no, and you're cold, cruel, arrogant. A girl who thinks too much of herself. Say yes, and you've opened the door to every accusation imaginable. You are shameless, corrupting, possessed. Stay silent, and they speak for you, and what they say will never be in your favor. This is the trap. A woman's virtue, they say, lies in her obedience. But obedience is not the same as agreement, and they don't want your consent. They want your surrender. Refuse a suitor, and you insult his pride, which quickly becomes your own moral failing. Accept him, and you're accused of manipulating him. Take your time, hesitate, ask questions, and you're called deceitful. There is no script that saves you, only performances that delay the inevitable judgment. The truth is, your choices were never yours. Even marriage, the supposed solution, offers no escape. If you marry too soon, you're impatient. Too late, you're suspicious. Marry well and people say it's luck. Marry poorly and they say it's your fault. But the worst sin of all, wanting not just a husband, but a life. Wanting to feel, to choose, to lead, that makes you dangerous. And then there are those moments you wish you could erase, not because you were wrong, but because the village has decided that you were. A lingering glance, a walk too long with a boy who smiled a little too gently, a missed chaperone. Rumors bloom quickly, waterless and wild. You become a story before you know how to defend yourself. And in the village, a story is all it takes to convict. especially if a child comes of it. No wedding ring, no blessing, no protection, just the evidence growing beneath your skin. They do not ask how it happened. They do not ask who. They ask where your shame is. They hand you fabric the color of dried blood and tell you to tie it around your waist. A red belt, a mark. You wear it to market. You wear it to church. You wear it in your own home. A reminder to everyone that you have sinned and that your body was the crime scene. You no longer sit where others sit. At Mass, your place is near the door, near the cold draft that creeps under the stone. You kneel alone. You receive no blessing. You're not excommunicated, not formally, but spiritually, you are adrift. Your mother weeps quietly at home, not for you, but for the family name. Your father doesn't speak your name, and the man, if he is known, often walks freely. Maybe he even denies it, says you tempted him, says he was bewitched, or maybe he says nothing, and no one asks him to. His life continues. Yours does not. Some women try to escape it by marrying quickly anyone who will take them. Others are sent away to distant relatives or to a convent to give birth behind high walls where the shame can't spread. Some are forced to abandon the child, leave it in the care of a sister, a midwife, a stranger. Anything to clean the stain, but nothing is ever clean again. The red belt is only the beginning. The whispers follow you for years. Even if you marry, even if you repent, even if you never touch another man, the village remembers. Because memory here is not a gift. It is a weapon, and they wield it mostly against women. Sometimes you wonder what would have happened if you'd said nothing, if you'd lied, if you'd run. But deep down, you know it wouldn't have changed much. The trap was already set. You were not punished for a mistake. You were punished for living in a body that others feel entitled to judge. And the men, they remain untouched, praised even, if they are bold, protected by silence and by the unspoken law that a man's sin is a moment, and a woman's a life sentence. You walk now along a narrow road out of the village. Ahead, another young woman carries a basket against her hip, her belt untied but her shame still visible in the curve of her back. You catch her eye just for a moment, and she looks away, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. You know that look. You wore it once, and you realize again that this place has built a morality so fragile it can only survive by breaking women into it. That virtue here is not about goodness, but about silence, about submission, and that every yes, no, and unspoken breath will be used against you. So you do the only thing left. You keep walking, not away from guilt, but toward a life where your body belongs to no one but you, even if the world isn't ready for it. You are born into a name, but not into rights. The moment you take your first breath, someone else already owns your future. First, it is your father, who decides what you wear, where you walk, whom you speak to. Then it is your husband, chosen for you, traded, sometimes bought, and with that exchange, your personhood is quietly erased. Not killed, that would be too merciful. Just overwritten. Because here, marriage is not a partnership. It is a transaction, a contract, signed not with love, but with control. Your hand is given, not taken. Your body is offered, not asked for. And once the vow is spoken, the door behind you closes with a finality deeper than any lock. In the eyes of the law, you disappear. You cannot own property because you are property. You cannot testify in court without a man's permission. You cannot refuse your husband because your consent was considered permanent the day you said, I do, even if you never wanted to, even if you didn't say it at all. They do not call it force, they call it duty. They call it the natural order of things. If he touches you without kindness, if he takes from you what you do not offer, the church tells you to pray. The midwife tells you to be still. The neighbor tells you to be grateful. After all, at least you are married. You wear a ring like a chain. Sleep beside a man who believes your silence is permission. Your pain is never seen as a violation, because to be violated, you must first be recognized as a person, and you are not. You are his. Even language betrays you. In the records, you are listed as wife of, daughter of, never by your own name. In law, your husband is responsible for you, your debts, your sins, your punishments, but also your body. It belongs to him, not metaphorically, literally. If he beats you, it is a domestic matter. If he forces himself on you, there is no crime, because to take something implies it wasn't already his, and you have no ownership over what you carry inside your skin. It will take centuries before the word even exists for what happens to you in the dark, behind doors closed by vows and watched over by a church that believes obedience is sacred. Until then, your suffering has no name, only bruises, only silence. Sometimes you try to remember who you were before the dress, before the prayers, before the promises you never made. But it's hard. The girl you were didn't understand that love here was not warmth, but control. That passion, once admired in stories, was a dangerous fire when lit in the wrong heart. That your dreams, to read, to speak, to be free, would wither not from neglect, but from design. You meet other wives at the well. You don't speak of it. You don't have to. The shared glances say everything. The careful way one of them flinches when someone speaks too loudly. The way another folds her hands too tightly. The way they laugh at nothing, just to prove they still can. And maybe once, in the woods, you find a moment of stillness. You take off your shoes, feel the mud beneath your feet. Remember the earth is still yours, if only in secret. For a moment, you are not his. You are only yourself, a woman breathing, a body unclaimed. But then you return, because you must, because you have nowhere else to go. And when he calls your name, or worse, doesn't, you answer. Because here silence is safer than resistance. Because here your survival depends on vanishing in plain sight. So you keep walking, moving through days that feel like copies, trying to hold on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the future, a woman like you will say no, and the world will listen. But not yet. Not for another 800 years. She rises before the sun, feet already aching, hands already swollen from the cold. No one speaks to her when she enters the field. No one needs to. Her place is known between the soil and the silence. She works without question, without pause, without recognition. Not because she lacks thoughts or dreams or the hunger for more, but because the world has made it clear. None of those things matter. Not when you are poor, and especially not when you are a woman. They call her servant, peasant, widow, titles that mark her status, but not herself. To them she is function, not person. A set of hands to carry water, knead dough, fetch firewood, a body to warm a bed, bear a child, clean a chamber pot. When she is young, she is eyed. When she is old, she is ignored. When she is in between, she is burdened with both. And if she is hurt, if a lord places a hand where it doesn't belong, if a master demands more than work, if her bruises bloom in hidden places, no one records it. Her pain is not a crime. It is routine. It is expected. Her voice doesn't echo through halls of justice. It barely echoes in her own home. Because to listen would be to admit she exists beyond her use, and that is a luxury she cannot afford, and her world refuses to grant. A servant girl who falls pregnant is not a victim. She is careless. She is ruined. She is dismissed. The man, be he stable boy or priest or nobleman, walks on unburdened. She, meanwhile, bears the weight of a body now marked. If the child is born, it is either taken or left to her alone. If she dares speak out, she risks more than disgrace. She risks being cast out completely. In villages, there are no scrolls that track these women, no records of their cries, no accounts of the hands they pulled away from. Their suffering is not catalogued. It is whispered, if at all, then forgotten. They vanish into the routine of survival, into fields, into kitchens, into cloisters. Widows fare no better. Once the man is gone, her value drops with him. Land returns to the crown or to his kin. She, who may have built the farm with her bare hands, is now a guest in her own home, if she's allowed to stay. If she is young, she is urged to remarry. If she is old, she is left to starve unless a child or distant relative takes pity. No one asks her what she wants. They never have. She has no dowry left, no name that matters, only labor. And yet, it is these women who hold the village together. They mend the roofs, patch the wounds, raise the children who are not theirs. They rise before the men and sleep after them. They know the weather by the smell of wind and the stories by the lines on their mothers' faces. They teach songs that were never written, preserve recipes never recorded. They remember births, deaths, and betrayals. They keep the world turning and are left unnamed in its telling. Sometimes one of them breaks. She drops the jug too hard. She weeps at the churn. She speaks a truth too sharp, and suddenly everyone remembers her. But not with kindness, with suspicion. Why is she angry? What is she hiding? Is she mad? Is she bewitched? Because a woman who suffers quietly is a good woman, but a woman who dares to name her pain is dangerous. You pass a well, and beside it, a line of women wait with empty pails. They speak in low tones, about bread, about weather, about nothing, but beneath their words runs something else. Understanding, solidarity. They know each other's griefs without naming them. One woman touches another's arm, just lightly no one sees. But it is a lifeline. These are not the women of legend. They are not queens or saints or witches. They will not be painted or prayed to or burned, but they are real, and they are many. They are the invisible foundation of a world built on their silence, and every day they rise again, not because they are fearless, but because they must, because even if the world does not hear them, they will keep speaking, with their hands, with their work, with their survival. Her name is Alditha. You won't find her in any chronicle or saints list, but the village knows her name. They whisper it with a mix of reverence and fear. She's not young, not old. Her hair smells of time and smoke. Her fingers are always stained, from berries, from roots, from the iron pots where she brews. They call her many things. Some say wise woman, others say herbalist. But when fear creeps in, they use a different word, so witch. Alditha learned not from books, but from hands. Her grandmother taught her the right way to press willow bark for fever, the way to boil angelica to ease the monthly pain, the pulse points to calm a shaking body. She knows which leaves slow the blood and which speed it up. She knows how to turn a scream into silence with a tea brewed just right, not to harm, to help, always to help. She never claimed to be more than she is, but even her quiet presence unsettles the men in power because she knows too much, especially about women. And in a world where the female body is meant to be a mystery, her knowledge is not welcome. It is threatening because it makes women trust her more than priests, because it gives women choices. That is the real danger. Alditha knows how to end a pregnancy before it begins. She knows how to start one when a woman is desperate. She knows how to ease a birth and how to mourn it when it ends in silence. She listens when no one else will. She doesn't ask shameful questions, and she never repeats what's told. For many women, she is the only place they are allowed to be whole. But that kind of power is not tolerated. It starts with a murmur. A girl heals too quickly after a fall, and someone says, Alditha touched her. A childless woman conceives after visiting her, and suddenly the miracle becomes suspicion. A man dies unexpectedly, and though he was old and brittle, someone remembers Alditha gave him a tonic last winter. The whisper grows into a warning. They call her to speak before the priest. Not a trial, not yet, but a test of obedience. They ask if she believes in spirits, if she thinks herbs work through faith or through something darker. She answers carefully, says she prays when she brews, that God made the plants, not her, but the room is already cold with judgment. The village turns slowly. One woman who used to visit her now crosses the street. Another returns a bottle she once begged for. Children stop knocking at her door when they scrape their knees. No one says the word yet, but it's in the air, and Alditha feels it. She's seen this before. She remembers Marin, who knew the same things, who helped a noble's daughter after a secret gone wrong. They found dried sage in her kitchen, and 3 nights later they took her. Said she danced with the devil, said her knowledge wasn't holy. They burned her in the orchard, the same orchard where to this day apples grow sweeter on that patch of scorched earth. Alditha carries Marin's memory like a wound, and she knows that if they come for her, they won't care about how many lives she's saved. They won't care that she eased the passing of the old or caught the fever before it spread. They will care only that she did it without permission, because in their eyes, a woman who understands her own body is unnatural, and one who helps others understand it, unholy. Still, Alditha doesn't stop. She keeps mixing, keeps listening, keeps lighting candles at night for those too afraid to visit by day. She knows the danger, but she also knows something deeper, that her work is older than the church, older than the laws, older even than the names they call her. She was never trying to be a witch. She was trying to be a friend, a guide, a keeper of knowledge that could not be trusted in the hands of men. And for that, she may one day burn. But until then, her door remains cracked open. A bundle of rosemary hangs beside it, a signal that healing is still possible, that someone still listens, that even if they call her a danger, she will not be silent. She is Alditha, and she is not alone. She wakes up with the frost, still clinging to the edges of the wooden shutters, long before the sun has warmed the dirt floor beneath her feet. Her back aches from yesterday's loads: firewood, water, baskets of barley. The day ahead promises no rest. She'll churn, sweep, carry, knead, milk, dig. There is no margin, no pause. Her hands are raw. Her thighs burn from squatting at the hearth, from climbing, from bending to scrub out stains that will only return tomorrow. 14 hours of labor, and not a single one that belongs to her. And yet, she still wants not comfort, not escape, not even rest. She wants touch, not the kind forced on her in the hayloft by a boy who thought her silence was an invitation, not the kind handed down like a chore by a husband who only knows how to take. No, she wants a different kind of touch, one that sees her not as a pair of hands or hips, but as a woman, a body, a soul. She wants to feel something in this gray, splintered life that belongs only to her: a pulse, a spark, a breath stolen back from the drudgery. But that kind of wanting is a crime, not by law perhaps, though sometimes even that, but by culture. Because if a peasant woman dares to feel, to enjoy, to desire, she is mocked, judged, punished, as if her exhaustion is her only virtue, as if only noble women are allowed to long for more than survival, as if dirt on her apron should mean silence in her heart. They say she's shameless if she laughs too freely at a passing soldier. They say she's disgusting if she kisses a boy behind the barn wall. They say she's dangerous if she doesn't seem broken. Desire in her is not seen as human. It is seen as rebellion, because to want, while poor, while female, while worn, that is unforgivable. She hears the whispers that she's loose because she doesn't cry over a lost lover, that she's asking for it because she wears her skirts high while she works, as if decency can be measured in inches of linen, as if dignity is something you can sew into a hem. She doesn't get privacy, not to dream, not to grieve, not to enjoy. If she is caught in a moment of pleasure, a stolen touch, a breathless moan, a heat that blooms against all logic, they don't say she is alive. They say she is corrupt, that her flesh is weak, that her soul is in danger, and the punishment is always more labor. She is not just shamed, she is overworked, starved of kindness, treated as less than the beast she feeds. A man with urges is excused. A woman with needs is condemned. If she is seen embracing someone in the shadows, she will carry the mark longer than any wound. She might lose her place in the fields. She might be passed over at church. She might be offered up to marriage with someone twice her age as a solution. And if she becomes pregnant, no one asks if it was wanted. No one asks if she was safe. She is scorned. She is set aside. She is reminded again and again that her body is not hers, not for protection, not for pleasure, not for protest. But even so, even under all that, she continues to want, because wanting is not weakness. It's survival. It's the only rebellion she can still afford. And in rare moments, when the night is warm and the fields are quiet, when the children sleep and the animals are still, she lets herself feel it. She touches her own skin without shame. She thinks of laughter, of fingers not calloused by cruelty, of warmth that asks nothing but presence, and in that moment, she is not a servant, not a scullery maid, not a sinner. She is a woman, alive, wanting, and that, in a world built to grind her down, is its own kind of victory. She is poor, but not free, No chains on her wrists, no iron on her ankles, but the weight she carries is heavier than metal. They say poverty humbles a woman, makes her immune to the temptations of pride, of vanity, of sin, but they lie. Poverty doesn't cleanse, it exposes. It leaves you naked in a world that punishes your need more than your mistakes. A rich man's daughter may slip. She may be caught with a chambermaid, or with ink-stained letters tucked beneath her pillow from a man not her fiancé. But she is shielded. Gold softens scandal, name silences whispers, a few months abroad, a sudden illness, a quiet marriage arranged in haste, and the slate is clean. But a poor woman, she slips once, and the world is already there to catch her, not to protect, but to condemn. A field hand found pregnant without a ring becomes a warning to every girl who walks barefoot through the market. A laundress who laughs too loudly is watched. A scullery maid who dares flirt is dismissed. And if one of them, any of them, becomes the target of a lord's desire, the guilt still finds its way back to her. She is always the one who asked for it. Her poverty makes her guilty by default. They call it morality. But it's only surveillance. A poor woman must work harder, stay quieter, suffer longer. She is punished more quickly and forgiven more slowly. If she's accused of lewdness, of rebellion, of seduction, her body becomes the proof. Her clothes are too thin, her steps too bold, her eyes too knowing. Never mind that her poverty forced those choices. Never mind that hunger makes people brave in ways comfort never understands. And while she's thrown into the stocks, or banished, or shamed in front of the church, the man, the priest, the merchant, the noble, returns to his seat at the table, untouched. This isn't justice, it's architecture. A system built to keep women in their place and poor women beneath the floorboards. But walk beyond the village, past the crumbling cottages and the blistered hands, and the story changes. Enter the world of silk and perfume. The world behind thick stone walls and velvet curtains, where women don't till the soil, but are still very much bound. In the noble courts, power wears a different face. Here, women are dressed in brocade and pearls, but their lives are no less tangled in compromise. Courtiers, companions, noble daughters, they're taught to move like chess pieces, not people, to smile without meaning it, to flirt without promise, to obey without appearing to obey. Every gesture is calculated, every word rehearsed. Some learn to play the game. They rise as mistresses, as confidants, as the favorites behind the throne. They are witty, charming, skilled in music and language. They learn how to be desired, how to make themselves indispensable without ever asking for permanence. For a moment, they almost have freedom. Almost. Because even in the palace, choice is a performance. A lady-in-waiting might fall in love, but only if it's useful. A mistress might bear a child, but only if it's a secret. One mistake, a wrong rumor, a jealous wife, a shift in political winds, and her world collapses. She is sent away, forgotten, or worse, remembered only as a cautionary tale. The walls of her chamber were silk-lined, yes, but they were still walls. Some of them try to carve power from the margins. A knowing glance, a secret letter, a dance held a beat too long. They create space where none exists. But it is always borrowed time. One false step, one scandal too public, and the same fate awaits them as the peasant girl in the stocks. Because at the heart of it, rich or poor, every woman walks a narrow path. Too loud, and she's unruly. Too quiet, and she's suspicious. Too beautiful, and she's dangerous. Too plain, and she's invisible. And in all of this, desire, real desire, messy and human and unapologetic, is still forbidden. Not because women don't feel it, but because the world has never figured out how to let them feel it without trying to punish them for it. So whether she wears rags or ribbons, whether she sleeps in straw or silk, the truth remains. Her value is measured not by her soul, but by how little trouble her body causes. And the moment she steps outside that line, she pays, always. She walks into the room like she belongs there, not because anyone gave her permission, but because she learned long ago that power doesn't wait for an invitation. Her dress is deliberate, her eyes sharper than any blade. She is not a noblewoman, though she sits beside kings. Not a wife, though she is more desired than any bride. They call her a courtesan, and they say it like both a compliment and a warning, because she is the one thing society fears most, a woman who knows what she wants and knows how to get it. They say she seduces with her body, but that's a lie. Her real weapon is knowledge. She reads, she writes, she quotes poets and politicians. She listens in the corridors where men forget she has ears, and when she speaks, they lean in. They laugh too loudly. They forget their vows and their wives, and the rules they wrote to keep women small. That's the real danger. Not her curves, but her mind. In a world where women are taught to lower their eyes, she looks directly at you. In a world where silence is seen as virtue, she speaks with precision, with wit, with confidence that was never granted, only earned. She is everything they said a woman should never be: unapologetic, articulate, desired, and desiring. But no matter how high she rises, she is never safe, because society doesn't know what to do with a woman like her. She doesn't belong in the fields. She doesn't belong in the church. She doesn't belong in the home. She belongs nowhere and everywhere, a liminal being, perched just outside respectability, close enough to taste it, but never to touch. The wives hate her because they fear their husbands will compare. The husbands fear her because they can't control her. The priests fear her because her confidence undermines their doctrine. And the law? The law doesn't know what to call her. She is not a criminal. She is not a wife. She is not a maid. She is a mirror. And men do not like what they see in her reflection. They try to reframe her, to reduce her. She is dangerous. She is deviant. She must be a witch, a manipulator, a ruinous thing, because if they admit that she is simply a woman, then all women might begin to ask for the same freedom. She earns more than most men, but she cannot buy safety. She dines beside princes, but cannot be buried in sacred ground. She commands attention in salons and banquets, but is never welcome in the family portrait. If she grows old, they discard her. If she grows too wise, they fear her. And if she makes a single mistake, if she offends the wrong man, exposes the wrong secret, refuses the wrong offer, she can be erased in a breath. One whispered rumor, and her name vanishes from invitations. One scandal, and the same men who once worshipped her pretend they never knew her. She becomes a cautionary tale. Look what happens when a woman reaches too far. But in the time she reigns, however briefly, she becomes something radical. She reminds the world that pleasure can have a voice, that beauty does not always bow, that intelligence in a woman is not a flaw to be hidden, but a flame to be feared. She was never just a mistress, never just a performer. She was protest made flesh, a rebellion painted in rouge and velvet, a living contradiction that no rulebook could contain. And that is why they will always try to silence her, not because she corrupted men, but because she proved they were never in control to begin with. Behind thick stone walls, where the air smells of candle wax and damp stone, they call themselves brides of God. The world outside believes they are safe here, from temptation, from pain, from sin. But no one is safe from memory, and desire doesn't vanish at the gates. She kneels in the chapel long after the others have gone to sleep. Her fingers move over the beads of her rosary with practiced devotion, but her thoughts drift. Not to the scriptures, not to the saints, but to the curve of a shoulder she once glimpsed before the veil, to a letter hidden beneath a floorboard, to the way a fellow sister's voice softens when whispering a prayer too quietly for anyone but her to hear. In the monastery, there's no room for want, officially. The body is to be silenced, hunger denied, pain embraced. But under the silence, a quiet truth pulses. The flesh remembers. The nuns know this, even if they never speak of it. Their dreams betray them. Their hands sometimes linger. Their eyes sometimes meet across the stone cloister with something more than reverence. She wasn't born holy. None of them were. Some came here as children, others as punishment. A few by choice, but most by arrangement. A dowry too small, a scandal too large, a family too eager to erase a burden. Inside these walls, they are expected to become pure, obedient vessels of light, but they carry with them the scent of past lives, of lost lovers, of stolen kisses, of touch remembered in the marrow. There are moments in the garden when sleeves brush and no one pulls away, in the scriptorium when two women's hands meet over the same page and neither one moves, in confession where sins are half spoken, half imagined, where guilt and longing blur into one. Sometimes they write, not to confess, but to remember. Letters not addressed to anyone living, only to the version of themselves they left behind. They tuck them into pages of psalters, beneath loose stones, inside the hems of habits, little rebellions, love notes to their own hunger. The abbess suspects, of course. She sees the flushed cheeks after evening prayer, the odd silences during morning chores. But she too was once young, once new. She carries her own weight of memory, a touch, a name, long buried. She doesn't speak of it, but she doesn't always punish either. Desire in the monastery does not roar. It flickers. It survives in glances, in shared bread, in songs sung too slowly. And though they may never act, may never speak the words aloud, they still feel, because they are still human. No robe, no vow, no psalm can change that. And when guilt comes, because it always does, they meet it not with denial, but with tears, with hours spent on stone floors, with whispered prayers for forgiveness they're not sure they want. They punish themselves not because they are evil, but because they've been told that feeling anything at all is wrong. But here's the truth they dare not say. Some of the most sacred things they've ever felt were not during prayer, but during a moment of warmth. A head rested against a shoulder, a hand held in darkness, a dream they wished would never end. They are saints in training, but not without scars, holy, but not hollow. And deep inside the silence of the monastery, behind the hymns and the incense and the hours of penance, Desire curls itself into the corners, refusing to be forgotten, because even within cloistered walls, the body remembers what the world demanded it forget. He rides past her window every morning, not fast, not slowly, just enough for the horse's hooves to echo in the narrow courtyard where she stands pretending to sweep. She never looks up. He never speaks. But the silence between them is thick with meaning. This is not a romance. It is something crueler, something quieter. It is courtly love, the kind that thrives on distance, on longing, on impossibility. She was taught that this was the highest form of love, pure, chaste, elevated above the vulgarities of touch, a noble passion that asks for nothing and therefore demands everything. The poets praise it, the songs immortalize it, the priests tolerate it so long as it ends in silence, but no one speaks of how much it hurts. He is married, of course, as most men of his rank are, and she, though unmarried, is promised to duty, to silence, to endurance. They know each other only through glances and half-finished letters passed through a servant. They speak more in memory than in words. Sometimes he sends her a flower wrapped in linen. Sometimes she answers with a ribbon still warm from her skin. These are their confessions, their rebellion, but they never touch, because to touch would be to ruin it. That's the lie they're told, that real love is in the restraint, that holding back is virtue, that desire left unfulfilled becomes divine. So she waits. At windows, at chapel, at the edge of the garden, she reads poetry with shaking hands, finding him in every line. She burns inside, yet keeps her face serene. That is what a lady must do, suffer beautifully, suffers silently. He watches her from a distance, chained by his own titles. He sends her books, but never opens one with her. He writes verses, but signs them with symbols. He is praised for his devotion, not to her, but to the idea of her, to the muse she has become. And she, in turn, is praised for her modesty, for never demanding more than a look, a sigh, a moment beneath the stars. But inside she screams, because this is not love, not really, this is performance. A slow, exquisite torment, staged in salons and gardens and great halls. A game where the rules ensure no one ever wins, especially not the woman. If she were to break the rules, to touch his hand too long, to ask him to stay, she would be shamed, not him, her. If she dared to want openly what he claims to want in poetry, she would be marked forever. A seductress, a threat, a fall, so she keeps the ache hidden. She learns how to live with it, the way one learns to live with hunger. Some days it sharpens her, makes her laugh at nothing, makes her eyes burn bright with everything she cannot say. Other days it hollows her out, and she wonders what it would be like to be held, truly held, just once without fear. In the tales, this kind of love is noble. The knight worships the lady saves the knight's soul. But what the tales never tell is that worship without closeness is its own kind of prison, that to be adored and never touched is to be made into a statue, beautiful, cold, untouchable, alone. Still they continue. He passes by again, and she is at the window. She does not wave, he does not smile, but their silence is loud enough to drown the world, and that is all they are allowed. The alley behind the tavern is slick with rain and ash, and the red light flickering above the doorway doesn't warm. It warns. Inside, the air is heavy with the mix of lavender oil and sweat, laughter too sharp to be joyful, and footsteps muffled by thick rugs stained with years of secrets. This is not a place for love. This is not a place for dreams. This is where women live when the world has told them they don't belong anywhere else. She didn't choose this life the way people whisper she did. No girl grows up dreaming of red scarves and coin purses clutched in dark corners. Some are cast out for a pregnancy, others for a man's mistake. A few come here from hunger, some from beatings, and some, yes, come because there was simply no other door that would open. But none come for freedom, because here, even the price of survival is steep. They wear red capes when walking through the city, not because they want to be seen, but because the law demands it. A mark of shame that doubles as advertisement. Men leer, women cross the streets, children point, and still they walk. Because inside the brothel, behind the curtains and candles and forced smiles, they are the ones holding the weight of everyone else's secrets. She learns quickly how to fake laughter, how to soften her voice, how to disappear when the wrong customer walks in. She memorizes which men bite and which cry, which want to be told they're gods and which want to be called by another name. She hears confessions whispered into her neck that priests would shudder to repeat. And still, no one sees her as sacred. No one sees her as real. The law punishes her for existing, but depends on her in silence. Publicly, she is filth. Privately, she is necessity, a valve for male frustration, a scapegoat for society's sins. If something goes wrong, a fight, a scandal, a birth, it is her fault. Always hers, never his. She cannot testify against a man. But he can ruin her with a single word. She cannot inherit, but he can buy her for a night. And if she dares to demand payment, or protection, or dignity, then she is no longer a worker, she is a problem. Some women leave, most do not, because outside the brothel, the world is even crueler. Here at least, they have each other. They braid each other's hair, share bread, hold each other when the sobbing won't stop. They teach newcomers how to endure, how to keep a part of yourself untouched, even when everything else is for sale. This is not a place of joy, but it is not always a place of despair either. There are moments, brief, rare, when she remembers who she was before. A song hummed under breath, a letter kept in a box beneath the bed, a name she no longer says aloud, but still carries like a flicker of something sacred. Sometimes, a man enters and treats her with something close to kindness. Not love, not rescue, just decency. He looks her in the eyes. He speaks her name without irony. And for a moment, she is not a body. She is a person. The moment always ends. But she tucks it away like a coin she refuses to spend. They say women like her are the lowest. But the truth is, she lives on the front line of every double standard. She knows the hypocrisy better than any priest. She has seen what men do when no one watches, what they confess when drunk, what they fear in the dark. And yet, she is the one punished. She survives anyway. She paints her lips. She lights the lamp. She opens the door. Not because she is free, but because in a world that has left her nothing, she refuses to disappear. And that, in itself, is defiance.